Growing up on a peaceful Iowa farm, Max Carter always thought of himself as just another average youngster. He spent his days caring for chickens, playing with toys in his dad's shed, and daydreaming about the stars. The infinite secrets of space and the possibility of life beyond Earth fascinated him. Yet Max never dreamed he would be the one caught in the middle of it all. An accidental clerical blunder started it all: the Galactic Union, an interplanetary alliance that oversees peace, and it changed his life forever. A scholarship program has been recently established by a coalition of several planets to allow a small number of people to attend academies on other worlds. Only the most outstanding individuals will be chosen for this program, which seeks to promote understanding across species. But Max was not even in the running for top spot, and yet, for some reason, his name showed up on the roster. That omission was not noticed until a gigantic spacecraft swooped down on the Carter farm, its shiny metal hull reflecting the sunlight and enveloping the land in a huge shadow. A commanding voice resounded from the spacecraft as Max scattered chicken feed throughout the fields. "Max Carter, get ready for transportation to Zarian Combat Academy." The voice jolted Max to the point that he lost his grip on the feed bucket, sending grains flying all over the yard. His worried and bewildered parents bolted from the home. In the blink of an eye, a ray of light descended from the spacecraft and encased Max in a glistening cocoon. The earth below him shrank fast as he was hoisted into the air, and the sound of his mother's desperate cries faded into the distance. Huge, armored extraterrestrials with reptile features and glowing eyes ringed Max from a distance until they disappeared entirely within the spacecraft. Their enormous size dwarfed his own, and the guttural language they used to communicate was completely foreign to him. In spite of their intimidating size, one of them offered him a portable translator, which he nervously put to his ear. With a menacing undertone, the biggest alien snarled, "Welcome, recruit." Its voice now echoed in perfect English. "We have chosen you." Being accepted into the most esteemed academy in the galaxy, the Zarian Combat Academy, is really a privilege. Max blinked as he struggled to comprehend what was happening. He stuttered, assuming there was an error. "I am not a soldier, I am only a farm boy." Alien eyes gleamed as it cocked its head to look at him. The spacecraft started to shake as it sped up, and Max wanted to disagree, but the Galactic Union had transmitted your name, there was no mistake. The unfathomable darkness of space washed over him as he peered out a tiny window and watched Earth receding into the horizon. Thanks to cutting-edge warp technology, Max was amazed at how much faster the trip to Zarian was. The sight of the Academy, a huge space station circling a brilliant red planet, shocked him when he emerged from hyperspace. The building stretched out for miles, with sharp spires, shiny domes, and huge training arenas that could be seen from orbit. Like bees in a hive, a swarm of ships swarmed around it. A group of extraterrestrial recruits escorted Max inside the Academy as the spacecraft touched down. Their confidence and power shone through as they ranged from multi-limbed insectoid animals to massive-scaled monsters. A lamb being taken to water was how Max felt, in contrast. The orientation hall was just as terrifying, with its shimmering walls that changed hues like they were alive. From the ceiling dangled enormous banners with holographic depictions of great heroes and strange symbols. Standing tall with 4 arms and an air of severe authority, the headmaster of the academy commanded attention at the head of the hall. The headmaster declared, "Welcome to Zarian Combat Academy," with an authoritative tone. "If you want to become guardians of the galaxy, here's where you have to train." Axe felt the pressure of being the center of attention as he refused to budge or show signs of weakness. Alien eyes fell on the one human in the throng, and rumors quickly circulated about him. Some betrayed their contempt with sneers that revealed their fangs, while others made noises that echoed through the hall with their laughter. "What is the purpose of this little thing?" An extraterrestrial voice scoffed at us. The admission of prey species to the school made Max feel contemptible. Even though he tried to go into the background, he was nonetheless the target of another student's ridicule. He was put in charge of the lowest level dorm, which was a small, poorly lighted space with a hint of sulfur and metal smells. The four-eyed, spike-skinned extraterrestrial that shared his bed with him made no effort to introduce himself. Instead, he only growled and averted his eyes. A zero-gravity obstacle course meant for animals with improved strength and agility was thrown at Max on the first day of training, which made things more difficult. Max had considerable difficulties while trying to traverse the floating platforms, in sharp contrast to his classmates who were able to do so with ease. He was covered in bruises and had fallen many times by the time the exercise ended. Combat training was an even bigger challenge. He was paired with an extraterrestrial reptile that was twice his size and could have dispatched him with a flick of the wrist. The instructor's displeasure was evident as he gave orders and seemed to regret Max's involvement in the program. As Max's self-assurance was already shot, the other recruits watched with a mix of pleasure and laughing. Max, physically exhausted and emotionally broken, flopped into his bunk as the day came to a close. Being a weak human among powerful beings made him feel completely out of place. Tears formed in his eyes for the first time since his unforeseen voyage started. Returning home was his ultimate goal. But a fire of resolve started to burn inside him as he lay there gazing at the ceiling lights ebb and flow. Not even on Earth was Max ever given the credit he deserved. He lacked speed and strength, but he made up for it with his brilliant mind. Looking back, he remembered the many. Potentially useful here are the many hours he had spent on the farm building contraptions, solving problems creatively and imaginatively. Max felt a new lease of life the day after exercising. He avoided relying on raw power and instead paid close attention to his surroundings and his competitors in the obstacle course. Taking advantage of the zero-gravity environment, he executed deliberate motions. Instead of going head-to-head with his opponent, he expertly dove and dodged their assaults by studying their patterns. Although there were obstacles and he received criticism, he went from being a bystander to an active participant. During a survival drill in a virtual alien jungle, where trainees had to dodge mechanical predators while navigating dangerous terrain, his life took a dramatic turn. While most people used their strength to fight or escape from the robots, Max used his brain. Using natural elements as inspiration, he created traps that lured the animals into ambushes. Not only did Max make it through the exercise alive, but he also beat out a few of his classmates. Word of his success quickly spread. Even while many still had their doubts, word of his unexpected triumph started to spread. In the eyes of some, he was more than a frail human being. An inner fire ignited in Max, and he swore to himself that he would show himself worthy of a place in the Zarian Combat Academy. He had no idea that his adventure was just starting. The obstacles that lay ahead would put him to the test in ways he could not have imagined, but Max experienced a newfound sense of optimism and a strengthening conviction that a single spark might set a galaxy on fire. The sudden, intense roar of the scream echoed around his cramped dorm room like a cosmic storm, emanating from the Academy's alarm system. The alien that shared his bed with him was already awake and grumbling in his own guttural tongue. He was muscular, had a thick exoskeleton, and scowled constantly. Max moaned as his muscles ached with each motion. Even though he had only been in the Zarian Combat Academy for a week, his body still had not adjusted to the station's higher gravity or the intense training he was about to undergo. "Move it, human," he said with a snarl. With no one having introduced themselves yet today, the bed buddy posed a challenge. Nobody would help if you fell behind. The night before, Max had overheard bits and pieces of the trial discussed in the mess hall, with a mixture of adulation and terror evident in the whispers. It was a mandatory experience meant to push new recruits to their physical and mental limitations. Achieving success would lead to promotion, while falling short may lead to shame or worse. The stakes were extremely high for someone like Max, who was already seen as the Academy's weakest link. Entering his outfit, he struggled with the cloth. Despite the fact that it was still too big for him, he followed the line of recruits to the briefing room. Holographic projections of former warriors, heroes preserved in bright extraterrestrial runes, shimmered from the domed roof of the enormous chamber. Prominently positioned at the front of the pack was Commander Threx, an imposing figure characterized by his pulsating blue veins and obsidian-like skin. Starting with the word recruits, Threx's voice echoed across the room like a cosmic bell. The challenge is upon you now. It is a test of strategy as much as strength. Navigating the simulated dome, an extreme environment meant to push you to your limits, requires you to be adaptable and survive. No further opportunities will be given. Marveling at the intimidating recruits around him, Max could not help but feel queasy. Their flashing eyes, plated scales, and sharp claws betrayed centuries-old predatory tendencies. Against them, what hope did he have? After being divided into groups, the recruits were led to the simulated dome, a huge circular stadium with a see-through ceiling. The domes under this obstruction was its. The landscape changed drastically, moving from lush rainforests to frozen wastelands, and from volcanic landscapes to desolate deserts. Along with his bunkmate and a few others who hardly recognized him as they entered the dome, Max's team consisted of 6 recruits. As the landscape transformed into an expansive jungle, the dense vegetation shimmered subtly in the light of an extraterrestrial sun. The atmosphere was thick with humidity, and the faraway howls of mechanical predators, creatures engineered to hunt and wipe out, filled the air. Getting there was the simple goal. Even though the extraction spot was in the middle of the bush, getting there was no picnic. Immediately after the start of the trial, Max's teammate moved with lightning speed and precision. The assault was spearheaded by his bunkmate, who was armed with spiked gauntlets and used his raw might to push through the underbrush. A multi-limbed insectoid recruit continued to explore ahead, complex eyes darting for danger. At the back, Max felt like a burden because he was unable to keep up. "Get back to the front, you idiot," his bunkmate yelled out. "Keep out of our path, please." Max felt forced to respond. To prove his value, the way he tightened his hands revealed the underlying anger. But he was abruptly put to quiet by the growl of a predator. Suddenly, out of nowhere, a huge mechanical wolf with very sharp teeth pounced on the party. A concerted onslaught of assaults was immediately launched by the recruits. Watching in awe, Max watched as the gauntlets of his bunkmates sliced through the predator's metal hide, causing sparks to fly. "Keep going," the bug-like creature ordered. "There will be more." They continued into the thickening bush. Little changes in the scenery, the distant gleam of metal claws, and the muted hum of equipment hidden under the earth were all nuances that Max noticed with every step that the others had missed. The predators were not behaving irrationally, he could tell because of his years of farming experience. They were leading the recruits into traps. Max yelled out, "Wait," in a trembling but determined voice. "We are being led into an ambush." He shouted, but his teammates paid him no mind since they were too busy moving ahead. Looking around, Max nervously chewed on his lip. His eyes fell on a winding road that veered off to one side, partly obscured by vegetation. It was a daring move, but it opened up new possibilities. With his pulse pounding, he hurried down the trail without stopping to ask for permission. The choice paid off. Only a few seconds later, mechanical predators emerged from their tunnels and the earth under the main route exploded. As he listened to the hisses and clashes of plasma guns, he could make out the cries of his fellow soldiers. Although he had avoided danger thanks to his diversion, he still could not leave the others behind just yet. 3 persistent predators had cornered and held down Max's unit as he retreated through the thick foliage. Their luminous pupils were fixed on their victim. Max's thoughts were racing. He did not have the courage to face them head-on, but he thought of a way around it. He came up with a strategy once he saw a group of dense vines hanging over the predators. Climbing a neighboring tree, he positioned himself immediately above the machinery, his hands sliding on the wet bark. As he was ready to swing, he took a big breath. As he sliced through the vines with the improvised weapon he had made from a metal fragment earlier, the vines lowered themselves like a net, ensnaring the predators and rendering them helpless until the squad could land the finishing blows. The expression on his bunkmate's face wavered between astonishment and reluctant admiration as he peered at him. "Not terrible, you human," he mumbled. The dynamics had changed somewhat, but the group reassembled and continued. Because of his keen eye for detail and lightning reflexes, Max was no longer kicked from the team. The plan included finding traps before they were activated, coming up with ways to outwit the predators, and finding a hidden stash of supplies that helped the squad heal from injuries. The forest gave way to a huge clearing as they drew near the extraction spot, exposing the last obstacle, a massive four-legged predator, more formidable and sophisticated than anything they had faced before. It moved with an organic fluidity and an energy shield that shimmered over its body. There was obvious fear on the faces of the squad members as they paused. Right up against them. But Max was already making sense of things. A tiny but potentially exploitable flaw flickered in the predator's shield. He fast devised a strategy, delegating responsibilities to every member of the group. Embarrassment eventually gave way to desperation, and they reluctantly followed his demands. Everything went according to plan. While the others went toward the predator's weak spot, Max and the insectoid diverted its attention. Despite the predator's destructive strikes and the heated struggle, the group was able to overcome because to their combined efforts. The crew finally reached the extraction platform, exhausted but victorious, after the predator's shield was destroyed and it crashed to the ground, a jumble of sparking metal. With a touch of interest softening his austere demeanor, Commander THX's hologram emerged before them, his bright eyes fixed on the chart. "It was remarkable," THX said. While they were reluctant to say it, Max's teammates nodded in agreement that maybe there is more to people than what meets the eye. Max felt an overwhelming sense of pride for the very first time since he enrolled at the academy. Because he had depended on cunning and collaboration rather than sheer might, Max Carter came out of the trial feeling confident. There was still a lot for him to prove, but his faith was stronger than ever. He had no idea that this was only the start of his adventure. There would be far larger obstacles to come. Having made the first step in establishing himself as one of the galaxy's elite, he allowed himself a moment of quiet triumph for the time being. Even though Max Carter was far from perfection, the days after the trial were a watershed moment in his life. At the Zarian Combat Academy, Max had complete acceptance from his other students. The murmurs of uncertainty that had before around him started to dissipate. There was still a long way to go, but he had gained some respect for his work in the jungle simulation. Even with his triumph, Max knew it was only a stepping stone, not the peak. He had to show his worth on a grander stage if he ever hoped to fit in. Unexpectedly, the chance presented itself just as the school was getting ready for the yearly Galactic Combat Tournament, a once-in-a-lifetime event that, attracting viewers and contestants from all corners of the galaxy, the tournament served as more than just a competition. It was a stage upon which the galaxy's brightest stars could display their talents, securing their place in history as heroes. Only the most courageous recruits ventured inside, since participation was entirely optional. The news resounded throughout the school, and Max could not shake the feeling that he was making a daring move by joining the event. Max watched his teammates on the training arena. Their movements were smooth and precise, their attacks deliberate, and their defenses almost impenetrable. He could see their indisputable edge due to their sharp claws, bio-enhanced muscles, and natural armor. Max knew he was average and weak in other areas, but he was strong in creativity, flexibility, and improvising. His trial performance proved that he could level the playing field, even against formidable opponents, with his resourcefulness. "You are genuinely thinking about going in?" Zero, his bunkmate, said. The gigantic extraterrestrial leaned against a nearby pillar, spikes spread across his chest, startling Max and stealing his attention. "The competition isn't the place for someone like you." Max shifted to confront him, his teeth clenching. "What do you mean, a human?" Zero said with a snort, his four eyes narrowing in concentration. "You may call it what you like, but I am referring to someone who has no chance of winning this event." Axe hesitated before responding, his gaze returning to the sparring recruits, whose motions were a war of force. The fact that he was slow did not stop him from trying. Without trying, he would never know what he was really capable of. With a mix of humor and frustration visible on his face, Zero shook his head. "You are either the most courageous or the most careless person I have ever met." Max was confused about whether statement best described him, but he knew he must not let fear stop him. He shocked his friends and classmates that same day by signing up for the competition. Some at the school even went so far as to publicly joke about how long he would be involved and place bets on it once the story spread like wildfire. Others watched with subtle interest, captivated by his boldness, as he faced annihilation. To begin the competition, there were a series of qualifying matches designed to weed out the less talented players. An enormous reptile extraterrestrial with sharp claws and a tail strong enough to break stone was Max's first adversary. The audience went wild as the battle started, waiting to see the much-anticipated debasement of the Academy's one and only human recruit. As Max stepped inside the stadium, he could feel the intense artificial sun above him, and his pulse started racing. As he moved, he could feel the weight of the many onlookers watching him closely and the reverberation of their ovations echoing through him. A menacing glint in his adversary's eyes as it swung about him. Despite everyone's expectations, the contest ended in less than 2 minutes. Instead of going head-to-head with his opponent, Max cleverly used his surroundings to his advantage. He baited the reptile toward a succession of collapsing pillars, luring it into a trap. He started a chain reaction just in time, and the building collapsed upon his opponent, trapping it for a crucial moment. Max landed a game-changing strike at a crucial time, sending the spectators into shocked quiet before they erupted in jubilation and shock. It did not take long for his unconventional methods to spark debate among academics. In what followed, he routinely shocked everyone by outplanning and outthinking his more physically and tactically gifted opponents. Using reflecting arena surfaces to obstruct the sensitive eyes of a quadrupedal extraterrestrial with a thick exoskeleton was a brilliant move on his part. He came up with a clever solution by repurposing natural elements to imprison an avian species that could fly. With every triumph, Arena's energy barriers cemented his reputation as the tournament's underdog. Max saw that his classmates' opinions of him started to shift as he progressed through the rounds. A combination of admiration and interest had taken the place of the scorn that had previously preceded him. Recruits who had disregarded him before started approaching him, wanting to know his strategy and get his counsel. Even Zero, who was fiercely critical of him before, started to show signs of reluctance toward adoration. Nach einem der Spiel rompt Zero his mistaken belief in the player's abilities. Max has been on fire in his matches, but he has to keep his composure since the real test of his abilities will be in the latter rounds. In the semifinals, Max faced up against a seemingly invincible opponent, as Zero had predicted. The extraterrestrial bug-like Silra displayed incredible nimbleness and swiftness when armed with swords. With pinpoint accuracy that allowed her opponents little room for defense, she had often beaten them. Max knew going into the contest that this would be his toughest test yet. With her quick and unexpected movements, Silra unleashed attacks from all directions, leaving Max with little space to maneuver. As he tried to come up with a defense against her constant barrage of blows, Max deftly sidestepped each one. He saw that Silra's motions followed a pattern. She always struck sequentially, switching between her left and right swords. Max used this realization to formulate a plan. He let her corner him against a wall by acting as if he was defenseless. He dove and twisted to the side just in time for her closing blow, diverting her sword to hit the energy barrier instead. Her forward motion was briefly interrupted by the ensuing shock. Surprisingly, Max took advantage of the situation to land a devastating blow, sending the audience into a frenzy of thunderous cheers as Silra was knocked out. Even though nobody had predicted he would make it this far, Max's triumph propelled him into the championship round. There was a lot of anticipation and guesswork among the Academy. Would the human underdog truly come out on top? Max, on the other hand, was too worn out to rejoice. His muscles hurt from all the constant fighting, and the impending final encounter weighed heavily on his thoughts. Zor Clan, the current champion and an intimidating character, was his opponent in the finals. At the Academy, Zor Clan was revered as a legendary figure, akin to a colossus with an unbreakable shield and unparalleled power. He had an undefeated record, and his triumphs were sometimes so resounding that they seemed almost merciless. Max was looking at his reflection in the polished floor of the training arena the night before the last battle. He was alone. His confidence began to waver. With Zor Clan on his side, how was he going to win? He was little more than a typical earthling, a young lad from a humble farm. Then it hit him. He had got this far by overcoming so much. Amidst the murmurs of uncertainty and the cacophony of laughing, Max finally made his arrival. In the face of seemingly insurmountable obstacles, he had become stronger and more resolute. He braced himself for the fight of his life, knowing that winning would prove mankind belonged among the galactic elite, not just a means to validate himself. The day of the championship match finally came, and the whole school was electric with excitement. Attendees included every single kid in the school as well as a large number of teachers and officials from all across the galaxy. Holographic displays hung in the sky above the grand arena, allowing viewers on other worlds to tune in live to the action. It was a spectacular display, honoring the best of the Academy. In a watershed event in galactic history, it was more than simply a match. Standing in the preparation room, Max Carter felt his pulse race. As a precursor to the high-energy weaponry that would shortly light up the stadium, the air was thick with the aroma of metal and ozone. In the mirror's mirror-like surface, he saw his own image. The Academy-issued armor was thin and more for mobility than protection, as was evident from the outside of his battle gear. In contrast to the gigantic, impenetrable outfit that his adversary, Zor Clan, wore, it seemed almost comical. There was a mixture of awe and terror when people at the Academy talked about Zor Clan, who was a real-life legend there. He stood at more than 8 feet tall and was covered in shining obsidian armor that radiated an advanced energy barrier that was difficult for even the most powerful weaponry to breach. His physical prowess was legendary to terror, and his accuracy in battle was unmatched. Zor Clan had been the undisputed champion of the Academy for a long time, having dispatched his opponents with a clinical precision that made his dominance very clear. Max calmed himself by closing his eyes and breathing deeply. It was inevitable that the odds would be insurmountable. Criticism, uncertainty, and apparently insurmountable obstacles have been with him since his arrival at the Academy. Still, he found himself on the edge of history. This match would determine his journey, win or lose. At the beginning of the contest, a loud shout resounded across the room. As Max entered the stadium, the clamor of the spectators engulfed him like a tsunami, and the competitors readied themselves for battle. The floor of the grand arena, an engineering wonder by Extraterrestrials, could change to mimic any terrain at any moment. A zero-gravity battlefield with floating platforms and obstacles hung in a huge emptiness has been programmed into it today. The strange splendor of the vista was heightened by the bright artificial stars that sprinkled the virtual vastness. Zor Clan's entrance to resounding ovation set the stage for an exciting atmosphere throughout the venue. The champion's movements were slow and methodical, almost robotic, and his enormous bulk outstripped Max's. Standing on opposing sides of the battlefield, the two contestants' striking differences symbolized the difficulty of the task at hand. A cry of "Begin!" came from the announcer, and the stadium went into utter mayhem. Zor Clan did not dally. He sprang across the empty space with a thud that rattled the universe. Quickly assuming a defensive stance, Max hardly had a chance to respond. The platform nearby was leveled as Zoran's armored fist slammed into the spot where he had been standing just minutes before, sending shards of metal flying into space. As he struggled to evade the Zor Clan's dogged assault, Max's thoughts raced. With each measured hit, the champion cornered Max and left him unable to escape from his devastating strikes. But Max knew it was foolish to confront Zor Clan head-on. Planning and adaptation were his strong suits. Despite the ongoing conflict, Max maintained his composure. Started looking for trends and vulnerabilities in Zor Clan's movements. Even though it was almost impenetrable, he noted that the champion's energy barrier flickered momentarily during his strongest assaults. It was a beginning, albeit it was little. Max may have a shot if he could precisely time his attacks. The zero-gravity environment had both advantages and disadvantages. On one hand, it made Max more agile to avoid Zoran's strikes, but on the other, it was very difficult to steady himself. Care was needed for each step. Maintaining command was of the utmost importance, since any lapse in concentration may lead to disastrous consequences. Zor Clan was forced to squander energy as Max expertly used the floating platforms to his advantage, forcing them into a series of high-speed chases. Nevertheless, Zor Clan was a very dangerous foe. His snarl resounded throughout the stadium as he rained down energy bolts from his gauntlets. The missiles shattered the floating obstructions, limiting Max's choices and placing him in a perilous position, yet each explosion barely missed him as he hopped from platform to platform. Holding onto the edge of a platform, Max's breath rushed out in irregular gasps as his thoughts raced for an answer. He could hardly hear the applause and screams from the audience. His pulse was racing. He knew he needed to use the Zor Clan's might against them if he wanted to win this battle. A notion started to take shape, a daring, even careless strategy that depended on time and accuracy. As Max peered around the arena's made-up architecture, he saw a group of floating energy cells. What if he could get the Zor Clan to come? Using the remaining platforms as cover, Max sprinted for the energy cells, knowing that a well-placed attack may break the champion's barrier and leave him vulnerable. The suspense was amplified when the sound of Zor Clan's thundering footsteps echoed around the stadium. Victory was within sight, as the champion's ravenous determination emanated from his gaze. Max, his pulse pounding with resolve, turned to face Zor Clan as he arrived near the energy cells. A low-volume come-on escaped his lips. Zor Clan complied, drawing breath a little closer, his armored hand poised in preparation for a powerful punch. Waiting until the very last second, Max dove out of the way. When the champion's fist made contact with the energy cells, an enormous explosion ensued, shaking the stadium to its foundations. The impact of the explosion sent Max flying in the other direction, where he crashed against a platform and lost consciousness. As soon as the smoke cleared, there was a brief hush in the stadium. The spectators seemed to be holding their breath. Clan Zorn stepped forward, his armor unharmed. Although it was not a devastating strike, it did open a gap due to his scorched state and his energy shield's intermittent flickering. Despite his aching muscles, Max forced himself to get up. Using the explosion's remnants as stepping stones, he mustered all his power and charged at Zor Clan. With a power that might break bone, the dazed but determined champion swung at Max. Max rolled and dove just in time to dodge the hit. Max made a last-ditch attempt to target. A little exposed joint next to Zor Clan's shoulder was the armor's weak spot. The champion's systems were overwhelmed as Max slammed his weapon into the joint with the accuracy that comes from many hours of training and pure resolve. As his armor locked up, Zor stumbled, his movements becoming more sluggish. As Zor Clan knelt, his towering height elongating Max's shadow, the crowd erupted into thunderous cries of joy. The stadium resounded with the announcer's voice, Max Carter had won. Max fell to the floor on the platform. Conquering the Academy's greatest champion was an astounding achievement, and he felt a wave of relief rush over him, causing his chest to heave. Gazing up at the audience, he could see expressions of wonder and respect. He experienced true belongingness for the very first time. Still on their knees, the Zor clan turned to Max and nodded slowly and deliberately, a sign of respect amongst warriors. An example of the transformative potential of will and resourcefulness, the event cut across social boundaries and species. Max came to the realization that this triumph meant more as his name was sung by the audience. It was a victory for all of mankind, not just his own, and proof that a single spark might light up the cosmos. As the thunderous ovation from the spectators reverberated off the icy stadium floor, Max Carter's heart pounded. Above him, on a continuous loop, the holographic panels showed his triumphant moment, the exact blow that had defeated Zor Clan, the Academy's unbeatable champion. Even Max himself had doubts about the veracity of the sight, yet somehow, it had materialized. The winner, Max Carter. The words seemed to be attempting to pierce his awareness as they announced his success, which meant more than just a triumph, it symbolized something more. Max had done more than just win the event, he had also changed people's perceptions of his species and his place in it. As Max glanced up, he saw Zor Clan, his towering stature unchanged despite the obvious exhaustion shown in his motions. A darkness had descended over him. With a look that was both mysterious and enthralling, the champion reached out a hand. It was clear that the gesture was an expression of reverence. Zor Clan helped Max to his feet with a supporting rather than frightening amount of power after he hesitated for a while before grabbing the armored hand. Zoran said, "You fought well, human," in a low, gravelly voice that betrayed none of the haughtiness he had shown before the contest. "You have earned this." The stadium exploded again, the cacophony almost drowning out Max as he stood there, the words of Zor Clan ringing in his head. He had worked hard for this, and it had not come to him by accident or chance. Adaptability and resourcefulness shone through when the announcer proclaimed the tournament's formal end. At the heart of the arena, a holographic representation of Commander Threx materialized, his intense blue eyes scanning the surroundings and fixating on Max to the point that the youth's skin tingled. Suppressing the onlookers, Threx lifted a hand. To fill the arena, Threx said, "Recruits, pupils, and esteemed visitors." His voice was amplified. Max Carter, the first person to participate in this event, proved that strength does really exist today. Being able to adapt, persist, and triumph despite adversity is often more important than being a large or particularly powerful species. The commander's remarks struck a chord with Max, and he felt a lump form in his throat. His win symbolized more than just his own accomplishments, it also acknowledged humanity's long-ignored and deserving standing in the galaxy. He had never intended to be a symbol, but at this very moment, he realized it. THX's hologram turned to look at Max square in the face. "Max Carter, I am here today to confer upon you the title of, according to the Zoran Combat Academy. Being an elite warrior, a distinction given to the most outstanding pupils, leaves a lasting legacy that motivates others to achieve greatness." Max was so proud that he clouded his eyes as the audience erupted in applause. A warrior's title was more than just a badge, it was an honor that went beyond bloodlines and social classes. Max felt the weight of the occasion sink him as THX's hologram disappeared. A mere Earth farm lad, he had transformed into a symbol of hope. With Max at its core, the institution flourished in the days that followed. Not only did his classmates and teachers notice him, but so did dignitaries and even the journalists from throughout the galaxy. All around the galaxy, interviews were televised featuring him, and his narrative was retold to demonstrate the limitless potential of mankind. Curiosity and awe took the place of the cynicism that had greeted his entrance at first. People started to see him differently to even the most minuscule of creatures. His interactions with his classmates also started to change. For example, Zero, who had been rude to him before, now treated him with a combination of friendship and respect. Zero made a light-hearted comment about Max's stature and might during their nighttime chat, but he was completely behind Max and would go into combat with him if given the chance. During practice, Max was approached by Silra, the terrifying insectoid fighter he had defeated in the semifinals. With her multifaceted gaze betraying a newfound reverence, she recognized his flawless approach. In an effort to level the playing field, Silra suggested a rematch. Max remained focused and committed, continuing his training with the same unwavering commitment as before, even if he won plaudits and praise. Our trip had just begun. The galaxy was enormous, and there were many obstacles that needed to be overcome. It was only the beginning of his success after winning the event. Commander Threx once joined Max on a balcony that overlooked the vast campus of the Academy. Even though the Elder Warrior talked with an air of gentle friendliness, his demeanor remained as commanding as before. "You have done well, Carter," Threx said, his eyes locked on the night sky. "However, you need to realize that this triumph is not only a personal attainment, This is a message for the galaxy. Sometimes the most unlikely sources may give rise to extraordinary achievements." Max nodded as he felt the weight of Rex's words hit him. "I see your point, sir, but I was not trying to make a statement. I just wanted to show myself that I could," Threx said, turning to him with gentle but penetrating blazing eyes. "And that, Max, is why you triumphed. Remember this, the galaxy will always test you. It will push you to your core. But as long as you stay true to who you are, you will prevail." The commander's words resounded with Max as he resumed his trek. While he was a student at the Academy, he eventually became a mentor who helped aliens and humans alike reach their full potential. The Academy's approach to combat training was revolutionized when his unusual tactics and inventive ideas were included into the curriculum. Years down the road, Max stood at the Academy's entrance, watching a fresh crop of recruits. Other people were there as well, and Max could see the same mix of terror and resolve in their eyes. With assurance that they will face the same challenges, he grinned. The struggles that made them stronger, Max's tale went beyond the school, motivating others all across the galaxy to go for dreams they never thought they could achieve. He became an icon of perseverance and creativity, showing that a single idea might light a fire that could reach for the heavens. Thus, Max Carter's reputation was cemented, not just as a fighter but also as an interspecies mediator, a symbol of optimism, and a proof of the boundless capacity of the human soul.